Good evening. Good evening. I'm going ahead and coming on board to see who else is going to join us for this great conversation tonight. My name is Marcy Thomas. I'm the founder of Brown Girl Collective and BGC Book Club, and I'm pleased to be here this evening for another great conversation with an outstanding author. Actually, we have two authors and journalists that will be online with us tonight just to share in a story, a memoir of what it means to be a journalist and Wanda Lloyd's journey from Jim Crow to journalism. So we'll be speaking with her shortly, and then also bringing on our special guest, Tina McElroy Ansa. So I see that there are a few people starting to come online. Welcome, welcome. Once again, I'm Marcy Thomas, founder of Brown Girl Collective and the BGC Book Club. And without any further delay, I'm going to go ahead and prepare to bring our guest, our special guest of the evening on, Wanda Smalls Lloyd. Wanda Smalls Lloyd is a retired newspaper editor and leader in journalism education. As executive editor of the Gannett-owned Montgomery Advisor, she was the first African-American responsible for the news content of that particular newspaper. In previous Gannett experience, she was a senior editor at USA Today and then managing editor at the Greenville, South Carolina News. Most recently, she was associate professor, chair of journalism and mass communications at Savannah State University, where I actually had the opportunity to meet her a few years ago. She has been a four-time juror for the Pulitzer Prize, co-edited The Edge of Change, Women in the 21st Century Press, and served on the journalism advisory boards at Virginia Commonwealth University, Alabama State, and Savannah State University. Just last year, the National Association of Black journalists inducted Wanda into its Hall of Fame in August of 2019. So there's so much more I could tell you about her, but as she is our special guest, and this is her memoir that we'll be discussing this evening, Coming Full Circle from Jim Crow to Journalism, I'm going to go ahead and bring Mrs. Lloyd on to share with us this evening. Welcome, Wanda. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's such a pleasure, consider an honor to have you here with us this evening.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Oh, yes. On this first day of June, actually. So we're moving into the second half of the year. So let's say glad to have you here. And I see our other guests. I can see her now. So we're good to go. Good with that. So, all right. Well, let's just go ahead and get started this evening. So your story, Coming Full Circle, from Jim Crow to journalism. I did have the opportunity to read it, and it was just so full of knowledge. It's not just your personal story, but I found it to be just a lot of history and a lot of things about Savannah, about things about journalism, and just fully rich of just information and knowledge. So I thank you for taking the time to share your story and share so much with us.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
You're welcome. I did.
Good.
And not just because I know you. But let's get started. So you grew up in Savannah, Georgia.
I did.
In the early
50s,
in the
1960s, yes.
In the 1960s. Yes. And one of the things that I found interesting about your story is that even though you were growing up in the South, and a lot of people have ideas about what it means to grow up in the South, sometimes preconceived notions of what life in the South is, your family actually was I found to be unique in just their story and the things that your foremothers and forefathers were involved in. So share with us a little bit about your background in your family, where you came from.
Yeah, so I say at the outset of the book that mine was not a poor me story. This is not a bootstrap kind of story. I grew up in a family of educated women, of people who owned businesses. I grew up in a funeral home, so my dad had a funeral home. My grandmother owned a school of beauty culture. I had teachers in my family. My mother my birth mother, who did not raise me, and we'll get into that, I guess, was a businesswoman who traveled all over the world, working for the Army and Air Force Exchange Service. So it wasn't a poor me story. I was just fortunate that I grew up in a family that valued education and faith and understand, and in a village that was even beyond the family, my neighborhood, people at my church, people at my school, people in my whole community, all of it African American, all of it Black,
Right.
you know, because it was Jim Crow era. So that's another kind of different aspect than what young people know today, because even though we had an all Black existence, we supported each other. We lived together, some families in different socioeconomic background, I should say different economic background, but socially we were all one. And it was a really supportive bringing up for me.
Oh, yes. And one of the things I loved about it, one of the stories in the book, you know, of course, you grew up, you were an only child. And as you mentioned, your mother didn't actually raise you, but obviously she was a part of your life along with other family members. One of the things I really loved, and share with us a little bit about the story when you had a chance to go to Columbus and not be an only child for a while, and what that was all about and what you did to change the trajectory of your story.
Right. So my mother was one of 4 children, and one of her brothers was married and had 4 children of his own, 3 boys and a girl. And something happened, and I never quite understood what it was, but something happened in his family where his wife left for a while. And I think she either went back to school, or I'm not exactly sure because I was very young. I was about 6 years old at the time. But they sent for my grandmother and my mother to come to Columbus, Ohio, to help take care of their 4 children. And I went along with my grandmother. My grandmother raised me until I was almost 7 years old by herself. And so we spent this year, I went to 2nd grade in Columbus, and then we came back to Savannah in the summer with these 4 kids. And I was usually an only child. I did not like having to share my space. I didn't like having to share my time, my thinking time, the things that I do. I didn't like having to share a room. I just wanted to be by myself most of the time because that's what I was used to. So at the end of the summer, they were packing up. My uncle came back to Savannah to pick us up. He went back to Columbus for the summer, and he came back and they were packing the car one day. And I looked at the car and I looked at my 4 cousins running around ready to get in the car. And I just didn't want to go back to Columbus. I didn't like the cold weather. I didn't like the cousins. I didn't like being one of 5 children. And so my aunt and uncle were standing nearby. They were building a house next door to my grandmother's house. You know, in the South, the old people give you a plot of land next door because they want the kid, whichever child it is, they want them to take care of them for the rest of their lives, which did happen. And so I asked my aunt and uncle, I pulled them away from the packing of the car and I took them up on the porch of my grandmother's house. And I said, "You guys don't have any children, do you?" And they said, "No." And I said, "You want one?" So I adopted them. They agreed to do that. Ultimately, my mother agreed and my grandmother agreed that I could stay in Savannah and that my aunt and uncle would become my parents.
Right. And I think that's such a great story. Number one, I'm an only child, so I can relate to not wanting to have to deal with all of that's going on. But I just thought that, wow, how smart you were and how much you knew yourself, and you at such a young age and knew what was going to be good for you, and that you had that conversation so that you could, you know, have the opportunity to stay and live with a family who loved you and nurtured you. And who's to say some of the things that happened in your life may not have happened had you gone
absolutely it would
in a different direction.
Yeah, there were some things that were planned for me that I wasn't aware of at the time. For example, my mother was going to go back to New Jersey where she was working. She was going to take me with her. I might have still been an only child, but I would have come up in New Jersey and it was cold, and I'm really glad that didn't happen.
Right, I can understand that because you mentioned Ohio as well. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, so I know all about that as well.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Yeah.
Now, one of the things, and let me see, a couple of folks are saying they absolutely loved your book and related to much of your story. Another user is saying, I love Wanda Lloyd. She
Aww.
is a legend and made so many noteworthy contributions to journalism as she mentored you as a young journalist.
Who is that?
Not sure who that is. Don't
Okay.
have a name, but someone said that you did mentor them.
Okay.
So. Well, one of the things about growing up in Savannah specifically, I could also relate to because my mother is from a town that's about an hour south of Savannah, actually where I'm located now. And it was just interesting to hear so much about what Savannah was like during those days. I know because I can remember my mother went to Savannah State, and I can remember saying how they would go shopping on Broughton and stuff like that back in the day. But because you actually grew up there, you had other experiences of not necessarily being able to do that in the same way that my mom was in later years. So tell us what that was like being in Savannah specifically and just dealing with the differences of Jim Crow and not being able to participate in certain things.
Sure. Well, so Jim Crow was a way of life. It was a legal way to separate Black and white people. And it really was a Black and white world. Sometimes I talk to young people who are Asian American. I had one young lady say, well, what about the Asians? And no, this was Black and white at the time. And it was a legal way to separate us. It was a segregation. And so everything we did was separate. We went to public schools that were segregated. We did not go to restaurants because we were not able to do that. We, of course, like in a lot of places, even today, our churches were separate. We had a street called West Broad Street, which is now Martin Luther King, which had a lot of Black businesses on it. And so a lot of our shopping was on West Broad Street, now Martin Luther King. But when we did go on Broughton Street, there were things we could not do. In some stores, we could not try on clothes. We could not try on hats. We were not able to get the change put in our hands. They would put the change on the counter instead of touching our hands. And of course, we couldn't go to the lunch counters. Even in the fanciest store in town, which was Levy's department store, there was this wonderful white tablecloth restaurant called the Azalea Room, which when I went in the store, the food always smelled so good. And I could look in there and I saw how pretty it was with the chandeliers and all that. And I always wondered why my grandmother, this was, because remember, we lived next door to my grandmother, why she always prepared a meal before we went shopping, even if it was the middle of the day on a Saturday. Wow. And I later learned when I was an adult that the reason she did that is so that I would not be hungry, and that would kind of calm me down and keep me from asking to go into the Azalea Room. So we never really went into any fancy restaurant. So it was a legal separation. We had Black doctors, Black lawyers, Black pharmacists. My whole world was pretty much Black.
Right, and that is so true. I know of that time, and it's interesting that actually, in a lot of ways, it was good to have that community and to know that you were always going to be supported and not be turned away when you needed assistance and those sorts of things. So that's very important. One of the listeners is saying that they experienced the same thing in Washington, D.C., segregated schools, movie theaters, department stores, all of that. So, and one of the things I found really interesting, as I do live in the area, like you mentioned specifically the Lucas Theater, and I'm thinking, well, I've been in the Lucas Theater a few times, but there's a time where I would not have been able to go into the Lucas Theater.
They integrated it in the maybe late 60s or early 70s. I think I was in college by the time it was integrated. So I really didn't go there a lot, even as a young adult, because I was gone and, we were used to going to the Black theaters, and that's what we did.
Right. And even like some of the parks as well, like you mentioned Daffin Park.
Right.
Those of us who are here from Savannah, have ever been to Savannah, you may be familiar with that. But I'm like, okay, I've gone there and walked and things like that. So it's things that you just don't think about if you didn't have that experience of knowing that these are places.
The biggest park in Savannah is Forsyth Park. And even after it was integrated, I would come home from college and my grandmother and I would drive past Forsyth Park. And she used to say, they let colored in there now, but she never really asked me to stop the car and let her walk in there. So she never really walked into Forsyth Park.
It's amazing just to think of how much things have changed even in a lifetime.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, one of the things that, of course, as you grew and you went to school, or when it was time to consider going to college, you had the opportunity to go to Spelman, which many of the women in your family had done previously. And of course, that was a great experience for you, I know, in going to Spelman. But you also mentioned in the book that there may have been an opportunity to go to one of the other colleges, I want to say University of Georgia.
Yes.
And at that time that your daddy, who your adoptive uncle, was like, no, we don't want you to go there. So what was it about? Well, I can understand why he may not have because of the times, but in going to Spelman, of course, that was your choice, but in following through with that family legacy, what did that mean to you to be able to do that versus perhaps going someplace else?
Yeah, when I got to Spelman, I was a third generation. My grandmother in my family, my grandmother and her sister went to Spelman when I think it was called Spelman Normal School around the turn of the 20th century. And then my aunt graduated from Spelman in 1936, the aunt that raised me. And I had a cousin who graduated shortly after 1949 was when my cousin graduated. So it was a family school, and it was expected by the women in my family that I would go to Spelman. But quite frankly, before I made the decision to go to Spelman, and you're right, it wasn't exactly a decision. It was decided for me. I told my family I really wanted to go to the University of Georgia. I had seen Charlene Hunter go to University of Georgia, where she was majoring in journalism. And I thought, and it was the only school in the state of Georgia that had a journalism major program at the time. And I really thought, I knew I wanted to be a journalist. I decided when I was in the 11th grade that I wanted to be a journalist. And I thought this just made sense to my, 16, 17-year-old mind that I should be able to go to the University of Georgia. And my family said, no, we want you to go to an HBCU because we don't want you to be a martyr. Charlene and I forgot his first name, Holmes is his last name, had encountered quite a few racial incidents where they had to be escorted on the campus by the state patrol. They were not received well by the students. And in fact, they had to sit out, I think it was a semester at least.
Oh, wow.
Because it was so difficult for them to go to school. They eventually did go back. They did graduate, but it was very difficult. And so that was off the table for me. And so Spelman then became my choice. My dad actually wanted me to go to Savannah State, but I think that's just because I was a girl and he just didn't want me to leave home.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Did Savannah State even have that type of program at that time anyway?
It did. It wasn't a major. It was in the either English or humanities department. So I could have studied it, but I couldn't major. I didn't major in journalism, actually. I majored in English because Spelman has no journalism major.
Right. And that's one of the things you mentioned, that during your time at Spelman, there were some classes that were started that you had an opportunity to get into over at Clark that allowed you to get that journalism.
Yes, I took every course they had. It was just starting, a program was just starting, and I took all the journalism classes at Clark. And so I think almost got the equivalent of a major. I just couldn't declare it as a major. Going to school in the Atlanta University Center, if you go to any of those colleges, you have, I guess, what you call reciprocity. You can take a class at any of the campuses and get credit for it, but you have to major in something on your own campus. And so I majored in English.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
And we're so glad that you did. But one thing now, fast forwarding a little bit, when you finally did graduate and you had an opportunity to get your first job, you actually went into an environment and experienced something that was vastly different from your upbringing and even your experiences attending college in Atlanta. Tell us about your first work experience.
Yes, in the book, I tell the story of having received an internship from an organization called the Dow Jones Newspaper Fund, which brings students to a location in the country at a university. There's a crash course for us. It was a 3-week crash course in copy editing because I chose to be a copy editor, not a reporter. And then they send you to a newspaper. So I was assigned to the Providence Evening Bulletin in Providence, Rhode Island, which was so vastly different. You know, here I was in New England, this girl from Georgia. I didn't know anyone. I didn't quite understand their accents. I didn't understand their food. I didn't understand the conversation that was going on the copy desk. So the copy desk is a place where you literally, it's a desk and you sit around the desk and you wait for copy to come and you edit the copy and you write the headlines and you select the pictures and all that stuff. And so there's a lot of busy time, but then there's a lot of downtime. And so when the downtime came, people would talk about, I don't know, what they had for dinner, what books they were reading, what movies they were seeing. And their whole culture was different from mine because I didn't even understand some of the things they were eating. You know,
Wow.
fried chicken and mashed potatoes and collard greens, you know, Southern goods.
Right.
And they were eating things that just were different. And it was a multicultural, I should say, it was a different culture. It was the Italians and the Polish people, you know, not just white people, but white people who came from different cultures than American white people. So I just didn't understand that. So I had to get used to, so I listened. I didn't talk. I was very shy. I had never really been in an environment full-time where I was around white people. And I really had been brought up by, I was not told not to talk to white people, but just by observing the people I was around, we never really learned how to have conversations with white people. So I was scared to death. I was scared to talk to people who were different. I was afraid I was going to say the wrong thing. I was afraid I would embarrass myself. But I also learned a lot by listening. Mm-hmm. I learned a lot about books. You know, we learned, as an English major, I studied the classics at Spelman College, so I knew a lot about reading, but I didn't read some of the everyday contemporary writers that people were reading on the copy desk in Providence. So I really had to listen and learn a lot about a different culture. So I became bicultural
right.
You know, I had to do that.
And that many of us do when we go into certain environments, or they say code switching or whatever the case may be. We have to learn how to operate in one environment and then operate in our own, you know, natural environment as well. Now, after you left Providence, you began to go to a lot different places and had experiences in many different cities throughout your career. Tell us a little bit about some of the places that you had a chance to go. I believe you went to Miami next, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I worked in 7 daily newspaper newsrooms. And so I was blessed that I had a whole career in newsrooms, which I prepared myself for, very different from what's going on today. I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a little while. So I went from the Providence Evening Bulletin to the Miami Herald, to the Atlanta Journal, to the Washington Post, which is actually the paper I stayed at the longest, to USA Today, to then the Greenville News in South Carolina. And my last newspaper, I was executive editor of the newspaper in Montgomery, the Montgomery Advertiser.
Right. Well, that's definitely a very storied career. And just in reading in the book, just the different opportunities that you had, different jobs that you were able to do. Sometimes, I know you mentioned, I want to say, was it in Washington, where the first job you had where you were dealing with a lot of men and they were doing things that today would now be considered sexual harassment?
Yeah, you know, and I'll let those who've read the book or who are going to read the book read that story. But it was a situation where I was working around men who were all white, who were older, obviously, because I was 25 years old when I went there. And they didn't have any qualms of saying derogatory things about women. And it wasn't really necessarily about me personally, but they would make comments about, you know, women's certain parts of our bodies. They might talk about a woman in particular, but it might have been a woman they saw on the street today, or it might have been their own wife or girlfriend. It really wasn't about me, but it was very uncomfortable for me to be in that situation. And I was a newlywed. I had just been married a couple of weeks when I started working there. I was new to the Washington area. I was still kind of new to working with white people. I mean, I had worked in some other papers since Providence, but I still hadn't had the full range of this multicultural experience that I now have. And so I didn't last long in that particular job. I did ask to be transferred, and I was too afraid to say to my supervisor why I wanted a transfer. I just said I needed a transfer because I wanted to work in a different area, and I got, I was able to do that with no big questions. It now kind of puzzles me why he didn't ask more questions. So I never really told anybody about what I now know was sexual harassment.
Right. And one of the things that I really love about your story, Wanda, is that throughout your career, even though you said that you were shy and things like that, you always found a way to advocate for yourself and what you wanted. Even during the time when you were in Miami, and you talk about going to Atlanta for a while, and just different things that you did. You said, "Hey, I want to try this. I want to do this. I want to look at this opportunity." And I really appreciated that about your story, is that you were not afraid, or sometimes maybe you were afraid, but you did it anyway.
Well, that goes back to the really strong women in my family that I talk about. And one of them was my mother, who didn't raise me, but we were very close, especially after I graduated from college. We got extremely close in my adult years, just because we had more time to spend together.
Right.
And my mother was a trailblazer herself in her career. And I think I observed that behavior and said, I've got to advocate for myself. I've got to ask for what I want and do what I want and not settle for something else. And so I really think that had a lot to do with it, by seeing other people in my circle do that kind of thing within the limitations of what we had to work with. Mm-hmm. Being Black and living in a segregated society.
Absolutely. And tell us a little bit more about your mother, because her story was very interesting as well, working in AAFES and kind of making her way through the ranks and some of the things that she did throughout her career as well.
Sure. So I say in the book that I call my mother Gloria because she was young. She was 19 years older than me, but she was a cool lady. She was so beautiful. And I always thought she was my big sister. And I really did think she was my big sister for a while. I call my mother Gloria. I call my grandmother Mother because my grandmother raised me before I went to live with my aunt and uncle. I call my Aunt Catherine, who was my mother's sister, Aunt Catherine, because I already had a mother. And I didn't need another person to call mother. And I call my uncle, Osi, who was Aunt Catherine's husband, Daddy. And so people were very confused about that. But my mother left Savannah when I was very young. I think it was before I was 5 years old, just some things that I remember that she wasn't there for, but I know it was before I was 6 because she came back. I remember my 6th birthday party. So I was very young. And she went to work for the Army and Air Force Exchange Service, which is called AAFES, here at Fort Stewart.
Right.
And during World War II. And when the war ended, things changed with the economy and with the workforce, and she had the opportunity to move to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and work for AAFES there. AAFES is the only company she ever worked for. And then she moved to New York and worked there. So she was a buyer. She was a retail buyer. And eventually she moved to Dallas, and then San Francisco was her last appointment. But she was always someone that challenged me to do better, to be better. And one of the things she challenged me on was, back in the day, we always wrote letters because that was the way we communicated. We didn't even call the phone and call a lot because long distance was kind of expensive. And so I wrote her a letter every week, at least every week. And she would send me the letters back, and she would get a red pencil and mark them up and tell me what words I misspelled and things like that. And then I had to rewrite the entire letter and send it back to her. And if there was one mistake in the second letter, she would mark it and send it back. And I had to keep rewriting the entire
letter. Wow.
Perfect. And so I really think she was my first editor because she trained me how to keep writing and writing and writing until it was perfect and spell everything correctly. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit. We haven't gotten to my own daughter, but when my daughter was a little girl, she brought home spelling words when she was in grade school, and I would make her the day she brought them home, and it was always the same day of the week, maybe Tuesday or something. Every Tuesday I'd have her sit down at the kitchen table, and she had to rewrite her spelling words 3 times. And she didn't really understand where that came from, but that really came from my mother. And I would take one of the lists, and the spelling list that she rewrote, and I'd have her tape one to the refrigerator door. So when I was in the kitchen cooking and she was doing her homework, when it was time to study spelling, I could look over here at the words and I'd say, okay, spell this word, spell this word. We would tape one to the dashboard of the car. So when I was driving, she went to a private school, so I drove her to a private school. So I was reading the spelling words on the dashboard as I was driving, and she taped one to a bulletin board in her room, I think, and she kept one in the original in her notebook. And so, I sort of passed down some of the things that my mother instilled in me, and that was one of those was writing and spelling to my own daughter.
Well, that's great. And actually, that's a good segue into another part of your journey, because, of course, there were so many things that you did in your career. But in the midst of your career, you managed to get married. Mm-hmm. And happy anniversary. I know you just had an anniversary a few days ago. So is it 45 years?
45 years, yes.
Yes. So happy anniversary. So you got married and you...
So I met in Providence, Rhode Island.
Yes. Yes, y'all have to read the book to get more of that story.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good story. I like that story. I was like, go ahead, Wanda. But yes, and you've met the love of your life, who continues to be a grand supporter of you and all of the things that you're doing. You have your husband, you had your daughter. So talk to us a little bit about just in that career, because many times you had to work crazy shifts and just all kinds of different things were going on throughout your career and the moves and all of that. How did you manage that, or what was that like for you as a married woman and mother, being able to maintain a career while managing a family as well?
Well, I tell a lot of young women when I speak to them at different universities and other places, I tell them the best thing I ever did was to marry well. And I'm not talking about money, because neither one of us had any money when we got married. But marry someone who understood that my career, number one, would be the primary income for our family, and number two would be the kind of the driver of our family dynamics, and that means where we would live, whether it's moving to a new house or moving to a new state. I changed jobs quite a bit while we were married in my career, and then when we decided to have a child, he knew that he needed to be available, have a steady schedule, because you're right, I had a lot of times in my career where I didn't work. I worked nights and weekends when my daughter was born. I was still working nights, weekends, all holidays when she was born. And so he realized that he needed to have a job that was more steady, and he changed jobs actually shortly after she was born so that he could work. He worked for a city where they, with a 9-to-5 job where he knew he would spend time every day. And he couldn't cook. He still can't cook. So I had to adjust and figure out how to make sure meals. And, there was some, what we call them, Pop-Tarts and
oh, wow. TV dinners back in the day.
I had to make sure that those things were available and show him how to prepare them. She was born before microwaves, but I think she was about almost 2 years old when microwaves came, and we were like at the microwave store immediately. So he could heat up her meals. The other thing was I used to, and I think, there are some things I wrote about and ended up in the book and some things that didn't end up in the book. And so I don't remember if this was in the book, but I used to tape stories on a cassette player. And so he could pop it into the cassette player at night so she could hear my voice, and I would read books on the cassette player. And so she would have the book in her hand and she could turn the pages. And I may have said turn the page, I don't remember her. But she would, that's the way we read books, because I wasn't there in the evening. I think I got off around 10 or 10:30 at night when she was very, very young. And so, I adjusted. I did what I needed to do while she was very young. I traveled quite a bit in my career. And so we had to find a support system, and we did have a support system to make sure. I remember one time I went to Germany on business, and he went with me. My mother just, she was retired by then, and she just came up to Washington and stayed with my daughter. And so my daughter spent all her summers with grandma. So we made it work. And I will tell you that I don't have a lot of friends who are journalists, female friends who are journalists, who either had a successful marriage and children or ever got married. A lot of people very close to never even became married. So I feel fortunate that I was able to have a family.
And that is a blessing. I didn't realize that there weren't that many, but I can kind of understand that if they're always traveling and keeping late nights and, maybe having to be called out at a moment's notice, things like that, depending on what they're doing, whether it's on the reporter side or on the copy editing side, management side, like you were on. So yeah, that's definitely, it's a blessing for you. And it's good to hear that story for those women or, upcoming journalists or women in any career path who say, hey, there is a way to have it all, as they say, but you got to marry well. That's the key. Marry well, people. You got to marry well. That really makes the difference. Or someone who read the book is saying, see that man over there? I want to meet him. So yeah, they read the book. They read the book.
Is there a man?
I'm sorry?
I thought you meant there was a man on the Facebook that you were
looking at. No, someone left that that comment, so they must have read your book. So that's great. So just I'm going to segue a little bit because your story is just so rich. There's so much going on in the story that it would be kind of hard to condense it all into an hour plus. We want people to read the book. Yeah. Yes. So that they can get more.
I really do want people to read the book. It's not just about buying the book, although that's good too, but I really want people to read the book because I find that a lot of people who are my age, after they read it, want to pass it on to their children and their grandchildren. I find a lot of young women who read it and they're inspired and they find out that, yes, I can have a family. Yes, I can have a career. Yes, I can be a leader. Yes, I should be supportive of people in our career, whatever the career might be, in terms of mentoring people, in terms of diversity and bringing in, people who are from diverse backgrounds. So I really want people to read the book because that really was the purpose of writing this book.
Absolutely. And that's why I say at the top, for those who missed it, that yes, it is your story, but it's a history lesson. It's career advice. It's mentoring. I mean, it's so many things. It's knowing how to navigate in a workplace where you may be, not a minority because we're major, but in the minority. So all of those things are just very important. But because, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a special guest, someone who's known you for quite a while, part of your life for at least, I'm not going to say how many years, but someone that you've known for a while. And she is a well-known writer, author, voice in her own right, and that's Ms. Tina McElroy Ansa. She is a novelist, filmmaker, teacher, entrepreneur, and journalist. Her work has appeared in the Los Angeles Times, Newsday, the Atlanta Constitution, Ms. Magazine, Essence, and many other publications. She is the author of several books, including Baby of the Family, Ugly Ways, which is my personal favorite, and The Hand That I Fan With, among others. Ms. Tina McElroy Ansa was your first year roommate at Spelman. So I want her to come on and talk a little bit about just that experience of sisterhood at Spelman and friendship and all of those things. So welcome, Ms. Tina. Hello.
Hi there.
And while you bring her in, let me also say she was a collaborator on this book. She encouraged me to write this book. She was the person who said, you have a story to tell, you need to tell this story. And so she was so helpful in getting me to understand how important it was to write the story. And she wrote the foreword, which is
Yes. It was a beautiful foreword. So thank you so much for joining us as well. It's a pleasure to have you here. So just share with us a little bit about your about your friendship and how you met and how you all have evolved over the years in your careers. We just want to sit at your feet and hear a little bit about your experiences together as friends.
Well, hi everybody. Well, Wanda, I don't know if you said it when our host said that she wouldn't mention the number of years, but it's 50 years. It's 50 some odd years. As a
It's
matter of
more than
fact, it's
years.
as
Like
they say, 50 some
54.
odd. Uh-huh. Half
Yeah.
a century. Anytime Wanda and I in a picture always say this is 100 years, this is a century worth of friendship right here.
Hmm.
So
Oh,
it's
that's a
Yes.
been really
blessing.
wonderful. It's been really
Yeah.
wonderful. I met Wanda in our freshman uh, dorm room at Spelman College back in '67.
Yes.
Okay.
And as Wanda says all the time, we had reasons that they put us together. We figured, we were both from the South, both from Georgia. Parents were business owners. There were a number of reasons, but they
We're
did
both
not
English
take into
majors
consideration,
and English
huh?
majors. And
Right.
English.
We were
Both
both
English.
English majors,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
And Wanda came to, let me tell you about Wanda. Wanda came to Spelman knowing what she wanted to do. I mean, one of the few people I knew, I mean, she was sure. She told me in her freshman year that she wanted to, in some part of her career, be run a mid-sized Southern newspaper. I mean, who
Mhm.
comes to Spelman knowing that kind of thing? And she ended up
She
running
actually
not
did.
only, two mid-size, but one, Montgomery, the morning newspaper in Montgomery, Alabama. So she came there knowing stuff, but we were very much alike in most things, but we were very different in other things. Wanda did her assignment right away, and I didn't do mine until the night before. One wanted the window open, I wanted the window closed. I mean, it was just amazing. But we both knew we wanted to be writers, and that's really what bonded us, I think.
Mhm.
And out of all the people that I was close to, I'm closer to Wanda than I am to anybody after 50 years. But one of the reasons, as I look back on it, is that Wanda kind of directed my life, my professional life. She's the one who insisted that I always knew I wanted to be a writer, but I was thinking,
Right.
oh, I was just going to write, oh, I was going to write. And Wanda told me, yeah, you need a career. So she told me, well, you want to write. She says, you're not even, she came in my room one night and said, this is in my sophomore year, and we weren't even in the same dorm. And she kept
Mhm.
storming in, and I guess it just hit her at one moment that I wasn't on the school newspaper, which she was the editor of. And she told me, you think you around here talking about you gonna be a writer, you're not even on the school newspaper. So I realized when we were when Wanda was writing this book, and I was at her side, is that Wanda's the reason I was a journalist. I knew I wanted to be a writer, but I had no idea how much I loved journalism, how much I was born to sit on the copy desk. And, Wanda was the one who led me there. So, when people ask why we're still together, it's not because of the journalism thing. It's not because even of the writing thing. It's because of a heart thing. We made a
Oh.
heart connection,
Hmm.
HEART. And we didn't
Hmm.
even know it because
Yeah.
we went our separate ways. I had another roommate in the sophomore year. She had another roommate in her sophomore year. But but that we had made a heart connection. She had acknowledged me as a writer, and I just looked up to Wanda. Wanda's always been that kind of can-do girl.
Aw.
That you want. She has that you want to be. You want to kind of please her. You don't want to displease her. She's always that person that you want to kind of share what you've done. Because she's not gonna make a big deal about it, but she's the one who realizes what went into getting those things done. And so that was our relationship, and it has continued to be a relationship, and it's gotten richer and deeper, as we've gotten older. We shared, you share different experiences with your friends, but with Wanda, it's gotten closer and more personal.
But for
My
a while,
husband,
we didn't talk all the time, all this 55 years or whatever. We would sometimes go years without talking. We might drop a letter or something. And then all of a sudden we would start talking, and we talk another, I don't know, months and months and months. And then time would pass, and then we just pick
yeah,
up where. So we really didn't talk. It wasn't
exactly.
consistent. But one thing that did, I think,
Mm-mm.
keep us together was that Tina was writing these marvelous books. And
Oh,
every time she wrote a book, I always had to just call her and say, come to whatever city I lived in, because we're going to have a book party for you. And she said she was looking up to me. I was the one looking up to her because I was trying not to be a groupie. I didn't want to act like, well, I only am her friend because she's a writer, but I really loved what she was writing. And of course we did have a friendship. So it goes both ways.
All right. Someone's saying their daughter's first dorm was Howard Harold. I enjoyed Mother-Daughter Weekend in Sisters Chapel. So yeah,
that's a new dorm. Howard Harold wasn't there when we got this filming.
Okay.
Now, when I say new, it was built, I think, right after we graduated.
I was just about to say they built Howard Harold last year, didn't they?
No, no. It's been around for a while. That's the one next to Manly Team.
Okay.
Yep.
I actually had a chance.
I was thinking of Manly. That's where I live.
Yeah.
I actually had a chance to visit.
Reminiscing, trying to get things together.
You're quite all right. I enjoyed it.
So sometimes we forget things.
Oh, that's okay. I'm loving it.
Every book, Wanda's right. Every book that I had, one of the other things that I loved about Wanda, and probably another reason that we're still friends now, was that she always celebrated every single one, of my accomplishments. She always did. Number one, she always had this wonderful book party. She would have me usually staying with her because they always had a beautiful house, wonderful guest rooms, always a nice guest room. I appreciate that. And I would stay there, and then we would have a party. She'd invite all her friends, when she was in Greenville,
Nashville,
yeah. Greenville. I'm sorry, again?
Nashville at the Freedom Forum. Is that what you're thinking of?
Oh, gosh, at the Nashville. Don't see, I forget. I have forgotten more of the things that she's done. Wherever she is, she always invited me professionally to speak to whomever, and then, she always gave me a personal sister, very professional book party. And so she would invite not only her friends and her sorors and all the rest, but she would also invite people from the paper, which then was just wonderful for me because then I got to meet more journalists who know more about my work. So she was always, Wanda's always thinking. She's one of those people. I'm telling you, she's one of those can-do girls, who's going to come up with the right idea at the right time. And so we would keep in touch in that way. And then our husbands started loving on each other. Mm-hmm. And so, they would stay in touch. And I remember, I never will forget, neither Wanda nor her husband is a big drinker. And I'm not a big drinker, but I like beer. And they knew that. And whenever I would come to any one of them, I swear, I'd go to the refrigerator and there'd be a line of whatever kind of beer I was drinking.
All right.
I mean,
that's a good friend.
Wanda assigned her husband. Probably Wanda, it was like a big sports arena kind of place. And she assigned her husband to take care of me, get me lunch, and let me have a beer.
Yeah, that was.
And that's what he did. And he found, and this whole place, he found one sports bar that was serving beer, and that's where we had lunch. I mean, we've been friends and been through things together, and she's been there for me. And I know, again, I always knew that this was a book that she should write. Yes. You meet somebody like Wanda and me as a writer, the first thing I say is, "Ooh, well, how did you get here? Where are you from? What did you do?" I mean, those are the questions that that we all kind of want to know when we meet somebody of stature of accomplishment. But Wanda just made one accomplishment after another, and at the same time reading stories to her daughter on cassette tape, and making sure that her husband feels really good about himself, and that he's part of her life, and she's that kind of person. And that's what the book shows, and that's why I'm so anxious for it to get into more and more and more hands, because there's a level of history that historians can stumble. There's a level of professionalism about how a woman makes in the world and achieves in the world. And, there's that personal story which I love. I'm trying to get her to write her next book about her mother, Marcy.
Yeah, that would be good.
Gloria, I feel the same way. I mean, I know that there's stories there. I can't wait for her to do that. Don't worry, you don't have to worry about it. I'm gonna stay on about it.
Okay.
But she has a lot of more stories. I am. I am, just like she marched
Yeah.
into my room and made me join the school newspaper. We may get our Gloria book out of her. I call her Glamorous Gloria.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is one thing, because Wanda, so much of your time was spent copy editing. You weren't, yes, you were making sure what other people were writing was what it needed to be, but you have your own stories within you. So it's a blessing that you are beginning to tell those stories in a more broader way and bless all of us with those stories. So we only have about 10 minutes or so left, because I know you mentioned you had some other things to do this evening. So I did want to, coming here this evening, I would be remiss if I did not bring up some of the things that are happening right now in America as to African Americans, and then also the way that people in the press are being impacted by the things that are happening right now at some of the demonstrations. So what are y'all's thoughts on this? Seems to be an attack on those who just want to tell the truth and tell their stories. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess my concern is that we're living in a climate where people are told that there's fake news, that the media is not does not have our best interest at heart, ignoring the fact that the media is obligated through the First Amendment. I mean, the forefathers wrote it into the very First Amendment to the Constitution that the media has the right and the obligation to let people know what's going on in the world. And it just makes, and I'm going to say even though I'm not working full time as a journalist, but it makes our job harder, because when you have people on the one side saying, well, why are you writing about that? Why are you putting that person on television? Why should we believe that when we really are telling the truth? So for the most part, let me say two things. One is, let me say this. When I had some surgery a few years ago, and I was in physical therapy, and a young man noticed that I had my earbuds in and I was listening, while I was on a machine, I was constantly listening. He said, what are you listening to all the time? And I said, I'm listening. This is an assistant in the company. I said, I'm listening to the news. I'm listening to, I don't know, CNN, MSC, whatever. And he said, well, why do you listen to the news? Isn't it all fake? And he was about, I think, 25 years old. He was out of college. He was studying to be a physical therapist. And I realized that someone that young had been told that everything was fake, whether it was, the president or his own father. I don't care who told him. So that's the first problem I see, that people are sort of believing this information. The other thing is, it makes those of us who are consumers of news have to work harder to find what's real news and what's not real news. Because, fake news, there is such a thing as fake news, because a lot of people are putting it out there. But we as consumers have to understand where the legitimate journalism is coming from, and be very selective about what. You can certainly listen to both sides. You can listen to, the conservative and the liberal and those in between, but just be sure it's legitimate news. And so I think that makes it difficult to get that job done. And I'm feeling really bad. And then you think about what happened, what's happening right now, where journalists are being attacked physically.
Yes.
And arrested for doing their job. That hurts me, that's going on now, and that somebody is telling people this is what you need to do. You need to stop this. You need to get that person off the street. You need to stop that person for telling the truth. So I don't know if Tina has something to add to that, but that's I think on where we are with journalism. On the other hand, I was almost done, but on the other hand, I'm very happy that a lot of young people are learning journalism the right way. At the beginning of this, I was on a book tour, which of course we had to stop because of COVID. But I went to many universities over about a 6-week period. I was traveling around the country, and I was meeting young people who have they have the same fire in their belly that Tina and I had in our belly about journalism as students. And they really want to get it right, and they're learning it right from some awesome professors and some awesome former journalists. And so I'm really happy that there's still a thirst for that, and that I do see a future for journalism.
Well, that is great. Did you have anything to add? Someone asked a question, but did you have anything to add, Tina, to what Wanda was saying, her thoughts?
No, I think that's that's pretty much it. One thing that I did that I have been very interested in following and adamant about saying something about it is, and I don't, you were breaking up one, and I may be repeating you, but the idea that journalists just regurgitate news, which is not their job, is to tell the story, just like
Yeah,
Wanda just said, what is going on. And I think for the majority of Trump's presidency of the time, those years, is that it took like 3.5 years for journalists to start saying, oh, wait a minute, it's not enough for me to say Trump said today that, Mars was closer than the moon. You have to say, well, no, that wasn't true. So,
yeah.
I mean, there has, and it took them a while to start doing that,
Mhm.
and a lot of false information was circulated. And, you think if among your peers, if they're able to discern about news and all the rest, it's just like Wanda said, that's just your peers. Most of the people out here are just consuming things without thinking about it.
Right.
And to be able to to talk about that, I think is an important thing, to be really consumers of the news and to be citizens of the world of what's going on around you, no matter how you want to look away.
Right. Well, someone brings up the New York Times has supported the 1619 project and that they found it to be fascinating. What are your thoughts? They say, I believe every child should have this in their hands in the classrooms. Are you all familiar with the 1619 project?
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't. I have to
I
admit I
thought,
haven't read it. I'm familiar with it, and I've got it. I just have to read it.
Right. It's a lot of information, but
Yes,
just basically talking about the period of enslavement and, things moving forward from there. So, yes,
I
I
think
would
it's an
suggest get
extraordinary
it.
project.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, an extraordinary project. I'm thinking of her Twitter name, but the woman who was in charge of it, Ida Bay, I can't remember her name now.
Ida Bay Wells or
But
something like that.
yeah.
is it Nicole? What's her name
Nicole Hannah.
again?
Nicole Hannah.
Nicole.
Is that her name?
Exactly. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I know she was spearheading it. Was a lot of people involved, and it's an extraordinary thing. And quite frankly, I'm shocked that it actually exists. I'm shocked that the New York Times actually, okayed this project that was, saying, in essence, we built this and y'all have failed us.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
that's basically what the whole thing is. It's failed us on every level, even while we were building this democracy, even while we were building this country.
Yes. Well, my last question
I
for
do. I encourage everyone to get this, to
oh
even
yeah,
get a
absolutely.
copy of it, or you can go online and get a copy.
Mhm.
Oh
It
yes,
really is, and
I
there's a
have it
lot to
online. It's
take
just a
in at
matter
one
of
time.
taking the time to read it. Well, I have one last question before I let you ladies go. And this is just to offer some encouragement to any budding writers or journalists, because of course we know that things have changed with traditional news in terms of newspapers, but a lot of things have gone online. You have a lot of people using new media to get stories out and things like that. Just any words of encouragement or advice that you would like to share with any budding writers or journalists that may be listening or may watch this later?
Tina, you go first.
Okay. I would say, first of all, read widely, widely, meaning not just what your friends are reading. Read the 1619 project. That's a good place to start. To know what's going on in your world and how we got here, and it's to write consistently. Write whenever you can. You know what? I have to tell you quickly. I learned. You think you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I learned something from Tiare Jones's book tour. She wrote American Marriage, and
Right. Mm-hmm.
the opera book. It just blew up, and now all her backlists, they're promoting it again. But oh, I heard Tiare say on like Jimmy Kimmel or something like that she hears a lot of writers telling other writers, emerging writers, that they should write every day. And she said, well, what a luxury. She said, don't you understand that people don't have time? They got things to do. A lot of people can't write every day. And I was like, wow, because that was one of my, points of my canon. You write consistently, but write consistently. And I say just read and write a lot. There are a lot of platforms. If you're just going to post it on Facebook, let it be really well edited, well written, and well thought out. And put your name to it so no one can claim it's not yours. But to read widely, you don't know what good stuff is unless you read it, unless you see it, and to write, write off. And I think everyone should keep a journal. People who call themselves, is Wanda told me, who call themselves writers, need to keep a journal. You need to read newspapers. You need to read all of that. You need to read widely. You need to know your world. You need to be an eavesdropper. Start listening to conversations, listening to language. When I meet a Black writer who is not good with dialogue, I start questioning their Black card, because writers of color are really good. They are. Even if you read something you don't even like, it's not good. When you get to the dialogue, it's going to be pretty much good. We have an ear, a facility with words, and we have an ear for language. And so start using that. There's no sense in being Black and having to go through all of this if you're not going to use one of the things that comes along with your Black card, and that is that certain ear for how Walter Mosley, for instance, he writes sort of like when you're reading his work, you kind of find yourself swaying with it, and everybody wants to write just like that. They want to have their own particular style, and you can't do that, and you can't write well unless you read widely and write consistent.
Thank you. Wanda?
Well, I'm going to give you some advice that Tina gave me, several things, actually. She told me to think a lot. She told me to think a lot, even if I'm not writing, just to think, because that thinking turns into writing. Reading, she's absolutely right about reading, and I read a lot of stuff anyway, especially journalism. But while I was writing the book, I found myself reading dozens and dozens of books that could help me put in context what I was writing. It wasn't, obviously my story is my story, but I was reading memoirs because I wanted to see how people structure memoirs. So if you're going to be a poet, read poetry all the time. If you're going to write memoirs, read memoirs all the time. If you're going to write history, read history books. I also read history books because I had to understand some of my own history. I mean, I knew my history, but I had to understand as a people what was some of my own history. I read slave narratives. I had to understand what led to people who thought they could actually, and not just thought about it, they did, actually made laws to restrict what we did when we were growing up, and what was the mindset. And so that had to go all the way back to slavery. So I had to understand slavery in order to understand Reconstruction. I had to understand Reconstruction in order to understand Jim Crow. And somebody who wants to take that forward with civil rights and all the things and Black Lives Matter, you have to really read your history, so understand history. And specifically for memoir writing or biographical writing, I would say save everything you can. One thing I learned when I was writing was that looking at a picture or some kind of document, or even just, anything that was about my life, I saved. And I didn't know I was saving it for a book, because Tina hadn't told me yet that I needed to write this book, 20 years ago. But I saved everything, every article I wrote, every article that was written about me, every journal that I wrote for, every book I wrote, I've written chapters in books for years, textbooks mostly. I've written journal articles on leadership. I've written journal articles on women and working women. I've written journal articles on, quite frankly, I wrote one on clusters of miscarriages, because I led a project where there was a cluster of miscarriages yesterday. So just save everything you have. And sometimes I would go back and find a document or an article, and all I wanted was one date out of that whole article. But if I didn't have that article, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So I'm going to tell you a real quick story. I was writing about a time when I went to the White House and I met the Clintons at a party. I was living in Washington, and there was a party. And I wanted to know, when was that? And I looked online at the American Society of Newspaper Editors, which is what the party was for. I couldn't find it there. I called the American Society of Newspaper Editors, and they couldn't find it in the Green Book, which is kind of the document of I just wasn't able to find it. And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I asked friends, and nobody could remember exactly what the year was. I just wanted the year. I knew the month was April because we always did things in April. And one day I was walking through the house with a cup of coffee in my hand, just wandering around trying to think, what am I writing about next? It wasn't even about this thing. And I looked up on the wall, and there was a picture on the wall in my living room with my husband and me and the Clintons. And under the picture, I had framed the picture. Under the picture, I had framed the invitation, which had the date. That thing has been in my house since 1990, whatever it was, 1993, whatever house I've lived in. I forgot it was on the wall. So save everything and then just go back and look at stuff to just jog your memory about stuff. All that stuff I found helped contribute to writing. So that would be some of the advice I would give.
Well, thank you so much, ladies, for the evening, for all of your sharing. You know, Wanda, your story, Tina, your relationship, all of us, it's just so much. And I'm overwhelmed. And a lot of people in the comments they've really enjoyed hearing from you all this evening. So I know there's a lot going on with, between COVID and everything that's going on right now. What things do you all have coming up that we can be on the lookout for? And how can people stay in touch with you? Start with you.
Well, my website is wandalloyd.com. So it's just that easy. I have information about the book, about my journey, about my family. I have information about how, if for anyone who wants to buy an autographed copy of the book, I have a way that they can do that on the website. I go to the post office 2 or 3 times a week and mail books because people do seem to like to collect autographed copies, and so that's there. So I'm doing that, and I'm on a virtual book tour. So I'm real happy to be talking to book clubs. I speak at faith groups. I'm speaking with professional groups, journalists and others. So I'm doing quite a bit of that. I'm really happy that now people are starting to call me and ask if I can speak because they've heard that I've been doing this. So that's kind
awesome.
of busy all the time.
Well, thank you for squeezing us into your schedule. And you, Tina, is there anything particular that you have coming up, and how can people stay in touch with you?
Well, again, I have my website, which is my name, McElroy.com, and there's a place to leave messages, and I try to get back to everyone. I am. I didn't hear the question. I think it was, what are we working on, or what do you
have right? How
you were saying?
Mm-hmm. So things you may have coming up, and how people can stay in touch with you.
I'm missing every other word.
Well, I will tell you how to stay in touch with Tina. She's a prolific Twitter person, so you definitely need to follow.
Oh, how to keep it? Oh, exactly. All right. Thank you. Yeah. I am. I'm on all the platforms. I am a Twitter person. I like Twitter. But I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, as well as, like I said, I have an email address as well on my website. And I am working on, I don't know who's going to get to the finish line first. I'm working on a nonfiction book and a book of fiction, which I've never done before, and I've never written 2 books at a time, which is challenging. But the book of fiction is is the sort of the next story in the Lena, I guess, in the Lena's Chronicles, and that is a story called From Here On Out. And it follows a little poor girl that she got across the street. I don't know if you remember in Baby the Family, the main character, Lena, discovers what poverty is, really, by meeting a little girl across the street. Because in the South, school teachers and people who had money were right next door to, folks who collected trash and school and all the rest of it. So that's what's going on in the town of Mulberry. But I really have putting my energy on my nonfiction, which I think is really my heart right now, because it speaks to my sisters. And it is a small book, and it's called The Secrets of the Bogart Queen. Because we women of color, especially Southerners, but we women of color, we get things done. And I don't mean sweet talking people, although sweet talking does help. But you know, just being kind to people, just seeing that there's some reciprocity in the world, and that you know we've all read the books. You know, Lean In, Cheryl. I can't remember her last name. Cheryl Lean In. Does anybody remember her last
Sheryl
name? Who wrote the
Sandberg.
book Lean In?
Oh, so Sandberg. Yeah.
Sandberg, thank
Sandberg.
you. You know, and
Mhm.
people got so much, you know, attention for that, but I didn't buy it. I read it. I looked at it in the bookstore. I saw that it, you know, it really didn't speak to us because we leaned in a long time ago. We leaned in so long ago, you know, we forget to
About to
tell people
fall
that's
over.
one of the things that you know that you have to do. So I really wanted a sort of a small codified book of steps for women, especially women of a certain age, but women, period, of how to be a Bogart queen. You know, you think of a Bogart as somebody coming in, you know, taking over the place, which is kind of what we do. You know, you be in a room with a black woman. Everybody has been in the room where there are no other black women, and a black woman enters, and the whole energy of the room changes. You know, we just should have some way of using that thing, that unnamed, you know, difficult to qualify thing that women of color have made them get things done in the world.
All right. Well, that sounds exciting. Looking
Yeah.
forward to
And
hearing
so
that. And just
it's a small book called Secrets of Bogart Queen.
all right. Well, we're looking forward to
And it will
both
be
of those
published by
things.
my publishing company, Down South Press.
Down South Press.
And
All
I can't
right.
tell
Well,
you when, but it's coming soon.
well, we'll be on the lookout for it, and I will stay in touch with the two of you. Actually, I
Thank you.
live in Southeast Georgia as well, so it's not that hard for me to keep up with with the two of you and find out when you have some things
You
going
know,
on and bring you back.
this COVID thing has really messed up a lot because we had plans to go on the road together. We were going to go on tour with me, and then you know this happened, so we have not been able to get together, and we haven't even been able to get together just hug, even though we're about an hour minutes apart. So we're looking forward to a time when we can get together. So we'll have to include you in our hugging session.
Oh, yes. I look forward to that. I look forward to that. Well, I'm going to go ahead. We are about 11 minutes over time, so I'm going to go ahead and let you all ladies go this evening. I have a couple more things just to wrap up with the folks that are listening. I'm going to announce the book for next one. Well, actually, I'll do that while you're here, so you know what we're going to read next. Well, our next book, and you may or may not be able to see it, but it is The Girl with the Louding. Make sure y'all can see it. The Girl with the Louding Voice. That's the next book that we will be reading in the BGC book club. I will post more about the date and information about the book. It's a new book that just came out earlier this year. It's about a young girl in Africa and her desire to change her life by becoming educated. And, you know, just the things that will happen, trying to get it right since there's three of us. But this is our next book. I'll be posting about it later this evening or tomorrow on both the Brown Girl Collective Facebook page as well as in the BGC Book Club. So along with the date that we will discuss it. So get ready for that. And as I am known to do, I like to give things away. So before we close out, anybody, and you all can choose numbers too. You all are qualified. You might have to tell it to me because you may not be able to see the notes. But people who are still here, pick a number between 1 and 64 and drop it in the comments. And you, Wanda or Tina, you can tell me if you're not unable to leave a comment, you can just tell me. And I'm going to pick a number between 1 and 64. I'm looking for some numbers. If you want next month's book, drop a number. All right. I see some numbers there. I'll give it another minute and then pick one. All righty. I see some numbers in there. I'm going to give it one more minute. Did you all get a chance, Wanda, Tina?
I put a number in the
No, I didn't.
on the platform.
Okay, well you can just tell
Where did I put my number?
In the comments. If you can do that, I'm not sure if you can do that from your screen.
I don't see a comment. Oh, they have. Oh, yeah. Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm picking one.
Earlier.
All right, I do see some numbers in there. So let me know when you've dropped yours. And I have one in my hand. I'll wait a second. And the person who's closest will get a copy of next month's book. So let's see. You got it, Tina?
She put one in there.
She did? I can't see it.
There are 18 and 34. Those are the two numbers.
18 and 34. Okay. Who picked 34?
I did.
Okay, well, you won the book. I picked 36.
Wow. Well, shit. Hey, she can't lose, huh?
Congratulations.
Oh yeah, my girl's on
So sorry, everybody, but hey, fair is fair. All right, so I will get in touch with you and make sure to get a copy. Well, send me, email me your information, and I'll make sure to get a copy of next month's book out to you. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Oh, one last thing I almost forgot. It's listed on the Facebook page as well as within the BGC Book Club. We are doing a summer reading challenge. It's called A Novel Season. We started last Monday, and basically it's a challenge to read as many books as you can this summer. Remember how when we were kids, we have a summer reading program. This is kind of a summer reading program for adults. And if you look either on the Brown Girl Collective page, you'll see some information there about how to participate. It's also within the BGC Book Club. There will be some giveaways and things like that going on, but read as many books as you can. Between started on Memorial Day, it'll run through. It will run through Labor Day, which is about 15 weeks. If you can do an average of a book a week, that's 15 books. The person who reads the most will get a prize to be determined, but that's just something that we're going to have ongoing in addition to the books that we'll be reading each month. So once again, thank you all. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Wanda, for the wonderful conversation. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I love you, and you all have a good evening. Everybody stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
Stay safe, everybody.
Yes, everybody, please stay safe, and we'll talk again soon. Have a good night.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.